For decades, Europe's economy was built on a reliance on cheap Russian diesel. This fuel powered heavy industrial machinery and the daily commutes of millions of drivers across the continent. This map shows the scale of that relationship. Before 2022, nearly 25 million metric tons of diesel flowed along a direct, highly efficient route from Russia into European ports every year, providing half of the continent's annual diesel imports. Following the invasion of Ukraine in early 2022, Western leaders faced an urgent mandate: cut off the revenues funding the Russian military. Since oil and gas exports made up roughly half of Moscow's federal budget revenues, the energy sector was the primary target. But completely blocking Russian oil from the global market risked a global supply shock. Plunging supplies could have spiked global prices by nearly 70%, pushing the world economy into a recession. The coalition had to figure out how to drain Moscow's war chest while keeping the actual oil flowing to the rest of the world. Their solution was a two-pronged approach. First, the European Union implemented a strict ban on importing Russian crude and refined petroleum products. Second, the G7 introduced a price cap system, making it illegal to transport or insure Russian oil unless it was sold below a specific threshold, like $60 a barrel for crude or $100 for high-value products like diesel. By forcing Russia to sell at a severe discount, the coalition successfully depressed the Kremlin's tax revenues. But severing that direct supply line introduced a sustained, hidden premium for European consumers at the pump. On February 5, 2023, the European Union officially banned Russian refined petroleum products. With their primary source of diesel gone, European traders looked for new sellers, while Russian exporters redirected their shipments across the global south. To understand the resulting costs, follow the physical oil. Instead of a quick trip across the Baltic Sea, Russian crude oil is now loaded onto tankers and sent thousands of miles south, where it is purchased at a discount by refineries in places like India. Those Indian facilities refine that discounted crude into finished diesel. Then they load that finished fuel onto new ships and send it all the way back to Europe to fill the continent's supply gap. Pushing millions of tons of fuel through such an elongated loop requires ships to be at sea for significantly longer periods. That ties up the global supply of vessels and bakes a sustained structural cost into the final price of the fuel. Before the invasion, chartering a long-range tanker to carry fuel from Asia or the Middle East to Europe cost around $10,000 a day. After the market rewired, those daily charter rates increased to nearly $50,000. Europe successfully stopped directly financing Moscow through fuel purchases. However, because molecules of oil are untraceable once refined, European consumers are now buying what is essentially Russian-origin diesel processed in Indian facilities at a logistical markup. Sourcing replacement diesel from India and the Middle East forces Europe's fuel supply through one vulnerable choke point, the Suez Canal and the Red Sea. When Houthi forces began attacking commercial vessels in the Red Sea, those vital shipping lanes became far too dangerous for many energy carriers to navigate. To avoid the danger zone, maritime companies diverted their diesel cargoes around the southern tip of Africa, the Cape of Good Hope. This added weeks to the journey and triggered an acute shortage of available ships. Almost immediately, charter rates for the Europe-bound route climbed above $120,000 a day. Meanwhile, Russia found its own ways to adapt to the geography of the oil trade. To bypass Western price caps, Moscow increasingly relies on a shadow fleet, hundreds of aging, unregulated tankers that operate outside of Western financial and maritime oversight. These unvetted ships often lack reputable protection and indemnity insurance. As they travel through crowded international waters, they pose a constant risk of an oil spill that no underwriter is actually obligated to clean up. By forcing the market to sever its most direct supply line, the European Union increased the distance its energy must travel, compounding its exposure to global shipping shocks and environmental hazards. The data confirms that the coalition's primary political objective was met. The price of Russian Urals crude diverged heavily from the global Brent benchmark, creating a discount wedge that cost Moscow tens of billions of dollars in export revenues. But the resulting supply deficit and elevated shipping costs rippled through the European economy. Industrial sectors deeply reliant on middle distillates and petrochemicals, particularly in Germany, entered a period of economic contraction. In response to these elevated structural costs and a cooling economy, Overall, European diesel and gas oil demand fell by approximately 200,000 barrels per day over the course of 2023. This is equivalent to about 10 million metric tons of lost consumption in a single year. As diesel costs remain elevated, a shift across the continent's vehicle fleet is pushing drivers toward electric vehicles. By 2023, new diesel car sales in the EU slumped to just 1.4 million units, down from 6.6 million registrations 6 years earlier. Europe set out to stop buying fuel from an aggressive neighbor. They succeeded, but the friction required to redraw the global supply chain made the fuel so extensive and so difficult to source that Europe is now learning to live without it.